Welcome to Midlife Reclaimed, the podcast for women ready to navigate midlife with more clarity, compassion, and energy. I'm Shannon Swales, psychologist, writer, doggy mama, and midlife woman walking this path alongside you. Twice a month, we explore real stories, expert insights, and practical tools to help you move through chronic stress, overwhelm, and burnout so you can reclaim your voice, your boundaries, and your joy. Please remember what you hear here is general information, not a substitute for personal therapy. This isn't about midlife crisis, it's about midlife reclamation. So let's begin. Today on episode 58, I'm thrilled to welcome Dr. Steindl, a renowned clinical psychologist, researcher, and trainer with more than 30 years of experience in therapeutic practice, training, and research. Stan is widely recognized for his expertise in compassion-focused therapy, CFT, and for helping people understand and work with shame, self-criticism, and motivation through the lens of compassion. He is the author of The Gifts of Compassion, How to Understand and Overcome Suffering, and shares his knowledge widely through his clinical work, writing, and his popular YouTube channel, Compassion in a T-shirt. In this conversation, we explore the many layers of compassion, beginning with how Stan came to work in this space, both personally and professionally. We clarify what compassion actually is and what it is not, and unpack why offering compassion to ourselves can feel difficult. Together, we look at fears, blocks, and resistance that so often stand in the way of receiving compassion, often where the deepest work happens. We also discuss how compassion helps us meet the harsh inner critic that fuels shame and guilt, and the key skills involved in cultivating compassion. Stan generously guides us through a compassion practice you can do alongside us in this episode, and we reflect on the many benefits of building our capacity to allow compassion in, from softening self-judgment to strengthening resilience and deepening connection with ourselves. It's a deeply insightful and practical conversation, and I'm so delighted to share it with you. Let's dive in. Welcome, Dr. Stan Steindl, to Midlife Reclaimed. Hey, Stan. Welcome to Midlife Reclaimed podcast. It's absolutely wonderful to finally have you here talking about this very important and special topic, if I do say so myself, compassion. Welcome.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Excellent. Well, hey, I want to first start off, and you've heard me tell you this before. Thank you so much for writing The Gifts of Compassion.
Gifts of Compassion.
This book, seriously, and you've heard this story as well, but for the listeners, I purchased this book before I fully burnt out and was unable to work as part of my professional development with working as a psychologist. But lo and behold, it was something I actually needed. And when I burnt out and I was starting to go to therapy, this was something else that I decided to do as my own self-led therapy with your accompanying workbook, which was really handy with that. So I want to thank you for that. But I also want to, for the listeners, to get to know you who maybe have not met you before. What got you into compassion in your psychology work?
Well, thanks for that feedback. That's delightful. I really had hoped that it would, just be useful, the book, to people, and to really sort of probably kind of break down the multi-dimensional nature of compassion, because I suppose in a funny sort of a way, compassion is at the heart of what many of us do anyway, in a sense. I remember right at the start, I've been a clinical psychologist for 30-something years now, which is kind of frightening, but also good. But, right from the start, it's that sort of, well, the motivation to be helpful, really, and to help alleviate suffering. But just through, well, clinical work, but also personal experience, I've just, over the years in particular, recognizing the role that self-criticism and shame can have in fueling suffering. In fact, even to this day, it's sort of quite remarkable sometimes when you hear the way people relate to themselves, like when they really express to you the sorts of things they say and the sorts of tone with which they say it, the
Yeah.
very self-attacking, self-condemning, self-hating tone that people
Yeah.
might relate to themselves. And often people very compassionate in towards others. That they're
Mm.
they're often very um, both motivated and skillful at being helpful to others, and yet just really being present with someone and noticing the role of this self to self relating in how
Yeah.
they're suffering, and so really trying to think, how can we maybe bring that same compassion that they express to others, but perhaps to themselves,
Yeah.
to relate to themselves with warmth and friendliness, or but wisdom and understanding, and also just to sort of bring care to themselves. So it really became a curious, yeah, not problem, curious sort of
Mm.
challenge, I suppose, to really
Mm.
understand compassion and self-compassion, and how we might bring more of that to people's
Yeah.
lives, I suppose. But then the personal side of it too is I guess my daughter was born in, I should know this, 2002. um,
Mm.
and she quite quickly developed or sort of had a medical condition that was
Mm.
very life altering for her, and several and many years of medical kinds of interventions and things, hospital admissions and surgeries, and she's now 23 and a registered nurse, and she works with kids
Yeah.
who are, sort
Oh.
of suffering, and she's very compassionate herself, really. But
Yeah.
all those years ago, that became a very personal experience
Mm.
of where self-criticism and guilt, but shame as well can really
Yeah.
come into it, and so it became a sort of a little journey there to, after all I'd sort of been talking about, perhaps, but then it
Mm.
was the rubber hit the road for me, and I had to sort of
Yeah.
work through my own self-criticism and my
Mm.
own and other things too, worry and rumination and
Mm.
and various other aspects of the mind, and
Mm.
start to sort of move my way through some of those barriers that we experience about self-compassion or receiving compassion, and gradually, sort of opening up to that receiving side
Yeah.
of compassion as well. And so it was sort of 2014, I think, that I managed to do some work in mindful self-compassion and then compassion focused therapy, and then really tried to, sort of
Mm.
develop things from there. So that's sort of a little bit, I guess,
Yeah.
of how we got to where we are.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that journey into and expanding into compassion, both professionally, but also personally as well. And what a like circular experience as well. But having, it often does, it made me reflect a little bit on my own journey into compassion as well, which first, like you shared, I was noticing a commonality amongst people coming to see me in the therapy room, that they have this shame, guilt, self-critical relationship with themselves. And I was like, whoa, what's going on here?
Mm.
Something I could also relate to personally. And then start curiosity and wanting to help, that compassion, leading me into exploring that work as well. And
Mm.
along the way, like yourself, when things got hard, or things happened, that, yeah, really delving into applying it to myself. So it's interesting, isn't it?
It's kind of
Mm.
it's sort of, we're all kind of humans, aren't we, on this journey? And as humans, we perhaps have or are or will suffer in some sort of a way.
Yeah.
Suffering is a part of life, and so there we end up noticing some of these tricky brain type experiences
Yeah.
coming to the fore. But so too with compassion, that's a part of our humanity as well. And
Yeah.
so often it's the adversity that starts to reveal to us, or sort of
Mm.
arise in us, is this compassionate motivation.
Yeah. I was wondering, Stan, if, especially for listeners who are hearing this word compassion for the first time, or if they've even delved into it already, I find it's always nice to kind of revise or explore or explain what is compassion? Like, what are we talking about here? I mean, we know what we're talking about, but what is compassion?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, it's sort of still a question that I sort of think about and explore and wonder about because like I think I said multidimensional or something at the start, but that's what
Yeah.
I think that was the word that slipped out. But
Yeah.
it is a bit like that really. It's more than just a sort of a single line on a treatment plan or something. It's actually, well, it's sort of complex and has many sort of parts and certain kind of skills and attributes and qualities that might go to make up what is compassion. We sometimes think of kindness and
Mm,
kindness is sort of they're very related, but sometimes we can be kind without necessarily there being suffering involved. And so that's
mm,
one thing, I suppose. Compassion is really, it's a sensitivity to suffering. And
mm,
that sort of can set it apart
mm,
a little bit. And we sometimes think love, but it's perhaps it's a certain type of love. It's a sort of a love for humanity, maybe, and that sort of
mm,
thing. But we can certainly bring compassion to people we don't like or
mm,
to our enemies sometimes is a very profound version of
mm,
compassion is where we bring compassion to our enemies or the parts of ourselves that we really don't
mm.
like too or loathe. So
Yeah.
it's sort of love adjacent a little bit as well or something like
Yeah.
that. It's a bit about acceptance in a way and non-judgment and
Mm,
trying to sort of not necessarily agree with certain behaviors or choices and things like that, but accepting the person who might be suffering. And we take a very non-blaming, non-shaming approach
mm,
there with
mm,
compassion and but it's sort of action as well. Thich Nhat
mm.
Hanh, I think it was, sort of said compassion is a verb. In other words,
Oh,
it's an action word. It's
yeah.
about taking steps to do something, I guess, to alleviate and prevent suffering. Paul Gilbert is the founder, I suppose, of compassion focused therapy, and his definition is that compassion is a sensitivity to suffering in self and others, actually. So
Mm,
even there, we include ourselves in the definition
yeah.
of suffering, a sensitivity to suffering in self and others with a commitment to try to alleviate and prevent it. So it's got
Mm,
the sensitivity, noticing, kind of engagement aspect of compassion,
mm,
and then it's got the wise action, trying
mm.
to do something to be
Yeah.
helpful, I
Yeah.
suppose. So it's kind of all of that, and it
Mm,
really involves wisdom and strength and courage and care, and
mm.
it's sort of kind of profoundly multi-dimensional and
Yeah.
takes a bit of thought and practice and
Mm.
trying things and then reflecting and on we go trying to be a
Yeah.
compassionate person.
Yeah, thank you, Stan. It really highlights the multidimensional nature, the word
Yeah.
that you use, because it is. And I hadn't heard that before, that it's a verb. I certainly have heard that it requires doing action, and it is a skill. It takes practice. And in those areas that maybe aren't as strong yet, like with the compassion towards self, but
Yes.
which is often a
Yes.
tricky one for a lot of people. But yeah, I liked that just because I verb action doing. It's just a nice reminder that compassion is a verb. It's an action towards others and self. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah,
Yes, it's a bit beyond a feeling in a way. It's
yeah,
more than a feeling, although it's often textured by many feelings.
yeah,
It's more of a motivation to sort
yeah.
of notice and engage, and then to sort of try to do something helpful. And that might be just to stay present with the person, or to listen, to them and listen really
Mm,
well, or it might be bigger actions. But yes,
mm.
that's the key. Sorry.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah, no, I love that. And hence that when you were saying it's more than, yes, it involves love, that fe I was about to say that feeling, but love is also an action too. Anyway,
Yeah.
multidimensional. Let's rest at that. I want to pause here and offer something deeply personal for anyone feeling depleted or stuck in stress, overwhelm, or burnout. My book, Nothing Left to Give, A Psychologist's Path Back from Burnout, shares my real life story of hitting a wall in 2021. Burnout, compassion fatigue, and resurging mental health struggles that forced me to leave my work and rebuild from the ground up. It's not just a memoir, it's filled with practical tools and reflections to guide you towards rest, reclaim your sense of self, and resist that pressure of constant caring going outwards, perfectionism, people-pleasing, toxic independence, all of that. You can find this book both in ebook and paperback via Amazon, or just head to the show notes for the link, or shannonaswales.com/burnout-book for the links. And now let's get back to the episode. One of the things I noticed, Stan, particularly in working with midlife women, but I'm sure there's other groups out there that struggle with this too, but particularly with the midlife women I work with, they're quite great at the outward compassion. So towards others, whether it be their children, their friends, their colleagues, their clients, or, the people they work with, patients, etc. But when it comes to the compassion in, whether that's from themselves to themselves, like we're talking about already, but also from allowing others to allowing that compassion in from others, that I find that it's particularly those elements of compassion in that they struggle with. And I just wanted to get your take on your experience out there with working with people, why that is, like what's going on there that makes this so challenging for people to allow it in.
Yeah, it's such an important part. And in fact, sometimes the real work is in sort of working through those fears, blocks, and resistances that we have about, especially receiving compassion from others or self-compassion. And in compassion-focused therapy, we actually really begin with these tricky brains. As you know, Paul Gilbert is from Derbyshire, I think, or somewhere like that, and he sort of says we have tricky brains, although that's not quite how he sounds. But and I suppose that's the idea, is that a lot of those blocks actually sort of arise from our evolved brains, that these sort of brains that have evolved over millions of years, I guess, to help us survive and reproduce, really. But in some ways that they're not really designed to sort of make us happy necessarily. And so and in one of the particular things about humans is we're such a social species. And so our place in the group, our sense of belonging, our sense of sort of safeness in the group is really paramount to us, because rejected or sort of tossed out of the group and we're dead, really, like out alone in the wilds by ourselves. And so the brain itself has a really keen focus on, how am I being accepted in the group? Am I worthy? Do I belong? And so on. And so it's kind of programmed in a way right from the outset to be kind of helpful and sort of contribute and kind of sort of perform a helpful function in the group, so in order to maintain our place.
Yeah.
The idea of seeking support and help, kind of is a harder one in amongst the way the brain is kind of trying to keep us or help us to survive. So it's kind of built in, it's designed for us, not by us, and we're just sort of born with a little bit of that kind of sense of giving, rather than receiving. But then and part of that too is just the very basic caring motivation, and women in particular really are sort of really inclined towards caring for our vulnerable young, caring for other vulnerable others, our elderly or our sick or injured or disabled. And so we've always we've always done all of that. And then the next bit that kicks in is the sort of we're shaped through experience. And
Mm,
I think women in particular are often socialized to
mm,
care for everyone first.
yeah.
And you sort of see it even in little girls who are sort of
Yeah.
looking after their dolls and concerned for their friends and
Mm,
encouraged to sort of do all of that and so on. And
mm,
so there's this sort of shaping that happens, and then just over the couple of decades, it becomes second nature, really, to
mm,
care.
mm,
But self-care feels foreign or feels even wrong, or
yeah.
there can be guilty feelings or
Mm,
feeling unworthy about that, and so this sort of this imbalance kind of grows, I suppose, at
mm,
that point. And then by the time we meet midlife, I guess,
yeah.
and we have aging parents and we have growing children and various career demands or
Mm,
and all that sort of stuff. There's this kind of almost feels like little space left for ourselves,
mm,
and so this sort of this sense that I'm worthy and I belong when I give and when I care, and I don't deserve or
mm,
shouldn't be, kind of caring for myself. And
yeah.
it's a very tricky one. Even for me as well, that sense of
Mm,
undeserving is such
mm,
a was that was a real that was the main barrier for me, I think.
yeah.
But I'm a therapist, and my job is to be there for others. Like I don't
Yeah.
deserve compassion for myself, and so
Yeah.
on. And I
Yeah.
actually remember it was Chris Germer from the mindful self-compassion world who
Mm,
said, your compassion is for all living beings, and you're a living being too. And so really
mm,
all we're doing with self-compassion is kind of widening our circle of compassion to
mm.
also include ourselves, basically.
Oh, I like that. That even just brought up a visual to me that was quite powerful. Like, yeah, we're widening our circle. We're not going, hey, over here, we'll tend to ourselves and self-compassion over here and compassion for others. It's widening that capacity that I already have inside for compassion. It's there. I'm widening it. I'm widening my circle to me and to whoever else that we're finding, yeah, that we need to widen that too. But usually, and as we're talking about, it's often ourselves that we struggle with.
Mm.
What
Yeah.
you were sharing there too, Stan, about your barrier, you said that I'm not deserving was your barrier. I was wondering if you could widen that, like to what are those fears, blocks, and barriers that you notice or in your work that you come across? Because I'm sure the audience will be going, oh yes, I have that one or that one. I was trying to remember what mine was. I need to go back to my book, but I think I remember going through your exercise of the fears, blocks, and barriers and ticking nearly
Yeah.
every one. That's what I
Ah,
do remember. But a common one I hear my clients, my midlife women say is that they believe it's selfish. But yeah, can you talk a little bit more to those fears, blocks, and barriers that get
yeah.
in the way? Well, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. No, that's good. The fears really are when the person experience a kind of an activation of their threat system or their fear response to the idea of receiving compassion. And
Mm,
you can I mean, there's a real double bind there, isn't there? That the fear or anxiety kind of response in receipt of
mm,
compassion. And so that's things like, people will see me as weak. People will see me as selfish. They might take advantage of me if
mm,
I'm more compassionate. And kind of various. I don't deserve compassion. I'm unworthy. Compassion is too self-indulgent. Those
mm,
sorts of things where people start to worry about what
mm,
self-compassion will mean, especially for how they're kind of seen by others and held in the minds of others. So there's the fear sort of version. Fears blocks are when the person might actually want to be self-compassionate, but there are certain sort of things that get in the way, time or resources or things like that. I don't have time for self-compassion.
Mm,
You know, I'm just far too busy with work and then caring at home, and
mm,
all of these things
mm.
are pulling me in different. I just don't have time for it, or I don't know what to do to be self-compassionate, or
Yeah.
what to say to myself, or that kind of block of just what is self-compassion. Some
Yeah.
people can feel that it's such a foreign idea that they can't quite even conceptualize what it is that they would do. And then
Mm,
resistances are when someone could be compassionate, but they're not. And sometimes that's when they're deeper in a different motivation. They might be right in a competitive motivation. And
mm,
so, they resist the idea of compassion because that might make them lose out or something like that. They're more in a
mm,
hold and control type of
mm,
strategy rather than a caring or sharing kind of a
mm,
strategy. And I remember I did a lot of work, or I've done a lot of work with veterans, combat veterans over the
mm,
years, and they often say, it's dog eat dog out there. You got to be tough.
mm.
None of this self-pity. They were very, very sensitive to the idea that self-compassion might be self-pity.
Yeah.
And so that there's sort of that resistance. Mind you, scratch the surface a little bit of some of those resistances, and there's often fear, that's at the
Yeah.
base of it. So yeah, fears, blocks, resistances, those are the sorts of
Yeah.
common ones, at least, that people talk
Yeah.
about.
Like what you said there at the end too, because yeah, they can or they feed each other, or the
Yes.
like you said, if you scratch the surface of the resistance, particularly that one, there's often fear, and that's something I noticed too, that the resistance, yeah, behind it is fear.
Mm,
Sometimes or a lot of times it's really interesting. But like you said earlier too, that tends to be where the lot of the work is, is and that's what I noticed too, or and have learnt from my predecessors like yourself in with applying it to myself, but clients, a lot of the work is around that. So yeah, I want to circle back something you said earlier, and I just feel like this is such an important conversation too, particularly for midlife women, but everyone too. That internal dialogue that both you and I have had, around and deal with that self-criticism, the shame, the guilt, and often misplaced guilt. And I hear this time and time again with my midlife women clients that, yeah, this internal dialogue that I was going to say shows up, is there. I was
mm,
wondering, and I suppose shifting towards how does compassion help quieten that voice or quieten that dialogue? Yeah, I was wondering if we
mm,
could talk to that. Mm.
mm. Well, one of the things that I find is sort of punches above its weight, or that doesn't sound quite like the right compassionate phrase, but anyway,
Cool.
one of the things that compassion really helps, or self-compassion, is it even just changes the tone of a lot of that inner dialogue.
Mm,
Sometimes you idiot, like it just
mm,
comes with a
yeah.
contemptuous, disdainful, kind of vicious tone, and
Mm,
and so well, you can almost say the same words, but you idiot.
yeah.
It's still not quite the right words, but even just a change in tone. Sorry, yeah.
Oh, sorry to, I was just, that's where I started. And even
Mm,
to today, my internal dialogue, sometimes I will go, oh my God, that was so silly. But I say it with a softer tone now. It just feels almost like, oh, you silly. Yeah, that was just silly. But it doesn't hit like it used to, whereas like, oh, you're just so dumb, or
yes.
that it was like a harsh teacher tone, I used to call it, because I had a couple of teachers,
Yeah.
mostly fantastic, but a couple of really harsh ones. And it was that kind of harsh teacher tone or harsh parental tone.
Yeah.
Now it's more
Yeah.
like, oh, come on, like almost like
Yeah.
a bestie who knows you well and's gonna pick you up on your stuff, but
Yeah.
like, anyway, so yeah.
Yeah. No, I like the sort of the teacher
Mm,
thought experiment. Like if what sort of teacher would you want your
Ah,
child maybe who's struggling with maths to have? Would you want the one with the harsher tones, the more sort of critical, harsh critical tones, or would you want someone that is able to still encourage and still motivate, but with a tone that is, kind of accepting and
mm,
kinder tone and supportive
mm,
tones and friendlier tones. And of course, we know what we would want for that little child who might be, struggling with maths and something
mm,
like that. So, in many ways, yeah, it can often sort of start with a shift in tone, but
mm,
people worry about losing self-criticism. Interestingly
mm,
enough, they worry that, well, if I'm no longer self-critical, I'll I'll become lax or lazy, or I'll lose my motivation, or I might like a big one is the if I'm critical towards myself, then nothing anyone else can say will ever hurt me. So you can
mm.
start to sense that self-criticism is really arising from that threat system activation.
Yeah.
And so it often becomes important too to kind of understand its protective function in a way. It's threat protection kind of a function. It's trying to kind of keep us safe.
Mm,
Self-criticism and even that really self-hating self-criticism. It's trying to keep us safe from rejection or abandonment or being cast
yeah.
out of the group. It comes back to that same
Yeah.
evolved piece, I guess. And so we shift the tone a little bit. We understand its protective intention, perhaps. We're
Mm,
not trying to get rid or destroy the self-critic, in any
mm,
kind of way. What we're trying to bring in is a compassionate understanding of the
mm,
critic and what it's trying to say, and then sort of invite in a kinder, wiser, stronger voice that offers compassionate encouragement rather than
mm,
attack. Because
mm,
and this is often important for people to think about, is that, yeah, we're not getting rid of the critic, and we're not losing that sense of motivation or aspiration or
mm,
sort of wanting to achieve our goals and so on.
mm,
We're actually not losing that. We're
mm,
shifting to a compassionate encouragement, which is still focused on those things,
mm.
but just delivers it differently, and a bit like a good teacher who's
Yeah.
able to be sort of interested and kind of believes in the young person and is able to encourage them. The compassionate voice doesn't say, "Oh, forget it. Just sit on the couch and snuggle up under a blankie and watch Netflix and eat ice cream." Like
No, it doesn't.
that can sometimes be a
Yeah.
misconception of compassion. Compassion isn't necessarily just doing what feels good in the moment. It's
Mm,
doing what's good for us and good for our
mm,
health and well-being. And so it still moves in that direction of encouragement and taking really helpful action. And so,
mm,
yeah, that's the kind of shift, I think. Shifting the tone, understanding the motivation behind the self-criticism, being aware of our fears of what we're worried about if we were to lose self-criticism, and then still achieve those same functions, but from a
mm.
compassionate, friendly, wise, courageous voice that still has, one eye on our aspirations.
Yeah, I really love so much that you said there, but I was just really connecting with, yeah, compassion is not about doing what feels good, but what is, and this might be my acceptance commitment therapy training coming through here, but like what's of value or importance, what's good for you. Um,
Mm,
yeah, like in your best interest and coming from that compassionate motivation. I just love that, yeah, separation there. And it
mm,
made me
mm,
think of the tricky brain in terms of that threat response. It usually is leading us towards protection, that like the self-critic, protection, to feel better, because at the moment we don't feel great and doing it through here. Whereas the compassionate sort of, it's more about moving towards not necessarily what feels good, but what is better for us. Yeah, I
And I
like.
like that idea of weaving in the values sort of work there too. Yeah, and
Yeah.
kind of where the compassionate part of us is very interested in that too. Is
Yes,
really
that's what I
interested
think. Yeah.
in living our values and
Mm.
being the kind of person that we want to be and having certain goals that we achieve and so on. So
Mm.
a lot of it is just that kind of qualitative shift in approach
Yeah.
rather than what we're trying to kind of achieve out of it.
Yeah.
It's a bit like the, I mean, that's one of the fears, I guess, isn't it? That I think you mentioned earlier, just that fear of self-compassion being self-indulgent
Mm.
or selfish.
Mm.
And
Mm.
yet, actually, when we really kind of get a sense of what it means to be self-compassionate, it's actually quite some way away from those sort of concepts. It's not
Yes.
about being indulgent because that would be just doing what feels good or sort of
Yeah.
gratifying in the moment. And it's actually also not about being selfish because often times the compassionate encouragement is about moving forward with our goals and aspirations, which is often about who we are in the
Mm.
world of people and how we
Yeah.
want to be towards others and the kind of person that we want to be,
Mm.
so it's the classic one, the old when the oxygen masks fall from the ceiling above, apply to yourself first before helping others. I mean that so that there is something quite unselfish about self-compassion because it
Yeah.
helps to ground and strengthen us to be actually even more compassionate potentially
Mm.
towards others.
100%. Yeah. I'm just going to pause here for a moment to share something with you. If you've been listening and thinking, I wish I had a space where I could talk about this with people who truly get it, that's exactly why I created the Midlife Reclaimed community. It's a gentle, real, and supportive space for women navigating midlife. Whether you're facing chronic stress, overwhelm, burnout, or simply wanting to reconnect with yourself. We meet for live, weekly support circles, share reflective prompts, and learn together so you can feel seen, heard, and supported as you reclaim what matters most. You don't have to figure it all out alone. Visit shannonaswales.com/midlife-reclaimed-community to join us. Now let's get back to the episode. Hey, I feel pulled towards exploring, and it's such a big topic in itself, but the new skills of compassion. Like we could spend a whole podcast episode, I'm sure a whole workshop on that. But I was wondering if, if you have a favorite, maybe it comes from the Gifts of Compassion book that you wrote, or just one that, sharing with the audience, particularly maybe the midlife women, just to get a taste of those skills of compassion, what to work on. I mean, you started talking there about the tone of voice and changing that can really help with that inner self-critic and yeah, guilt and shame provider.
Mm,
But yeah, is there another one? Yeah, these skills of compassion, what
mm.
you would like to share? Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, one that I really use regularly, and it's a very kind of transportable, adaptable, kind of relatively brief kind of practice. In fact, I was talking to someone yesterday or the day before about, kind of in the morning, waking up, opening the window, opening the blinds, I suppose, and doing this kind of practice, which is really all about setting an intention for the day in a way. And we often begin with the body and try to create, to slow the breath, create an upright but relaxed posture, a friendly face, and so on. And then offering ourselves, little words of compassionate encouragement or well wishes and so on. Actually, should we just go ahead and do it, do you think? Is that?
I'd be happy to if you're happy to, Then yeah,
Yeah.
I'll certainly go along.
Yeah.
What's
Well,
listeners out there?
if everyone wants to do this, just placing your feet kind of flat on the floor, but maybe hip width apart or thereabouts, rolling back the shoulders a little bit and opening up the chest, just creating a sort of upright but relaxed posture, letting your hands rest in your lap for now, and just kind of creating that comfortable posture. Lifting the chin as if you're looking out a little bit towards the horizon, and gently closing your eyes. And we really just start by slowing down the breath, breathing in for a count of 3 and out for a count of 3. And we use the out breath to activate parasympathetic nervous system in a way, but certainly just trying to down regulate the body, slow down the mind. As you reach the bottom of the breath, just see if you can notice the way that maybe the heart rate slows just a little, or tension eases in the body. There's a little pause at the bottom of the breath, and then we breathe in again. Maybe slow down the breath a little bit more. Breathe in for a count of 4 and out for a count of 4. And bring your attention to your face or your facial expression, and just relax the jaw and relax the brow, and maybe a little half smile, something, just creating a kind of friendly facial expression. And then just slowing the breath a little bit more, breathing in for a count of 5 and out for a count of 5. Or perhaps just settling into a rhythm that feels slowing and soothing for you. Body slowing down, mind slowing down. And now, if you like, just placing a hand or two hands on your heart, just to create a little bit of affection, physical affection and warmth. And just say to yourself, just silently in your own mind, some of the following. This is hard, and I'm doing my best. What is it that I also really need right now? This is hard, and I'm doing my best. What is it that I also really need right now? And what would be most helpful? And just letting your hand rest once again on your lap. Just checking in with your body posture and upright but relaxed. Your friendly facial expression. And the soothing rhythm breathing. Just breathing in for 4 or 5 and out for 4 or 5. Just for a few more moments. Start to bring a little bit of movement back to the body, just wriggling your toes or your fingers or rolling the wrists a little bit, maybe moving a bit in the chair, stretching if you like, and perhaps taking in a slightly deeper in breath just to enliven the body a little bit. And when you're ready, you can once again open your eyes.
Ah, oh, okay, that's it. We'll finish. I feel that was brilliant. Thank you, Stan, for taking us through that really insight gaining as well, but also giving to the body in that way, with that breath and also with the lovely messages to self.
Hmm.
So many
Yeah.
elements of compassion there. Um,
Yes.
and the insight, what do I need? Yeah, I loved that. And
I
arriving,
find,
yeah, yeah.
sorry, I find that question really helpful, that like what, because, like what do I also need right now? It's sort of, it's bringing it to a self-compassionate motivation. It's acknowledging that, you know, that there are other um, directions that our compassion might flow. But what do I also need, in a
Mm.
sense? So I guess that is the widening of the circle that we mentioned earlier.
Yeah, and it's starting. I love the suggestion, or this be the start of the day, the first thing. It made me think because the first thing at the moment that I do is pick up my phone.
Ah,
And
yes.
yeah, it's a practice, or it's a behavior I'm and that actually, what do I need? What came up was, yeah, that I need to start my day with this.
Mm, mm.
And this practice
The,
and
the the other thing that really I think is tough is, yeah, we reach for our phone.
mm,
And but the other thing we sometimes do is we go to the bathroom
mhm,
and we do all of that, and then we look in the mirror, and
mm,
a part of ourselves goes, ugh,
mm,
um, I'm looking so old, or I'm looking so rough around the edges, or this is a bad hair day, or worse sometimes.
yeah,
And yes, I do wonder whether there's room for a little practice like that before basically what is launching into a bit more like self-criticism, and
yeah,
of course the real sort of supercharging of a practice like that
mm,
is to be able to offer yourself compassion in the mirror when you are looking into your own eyes and you're seeing through to the experience of life and the difficulties and maybe the suffering that is there behind those eyes, and you're able to sort of direct that compassion to yourself through the mirror.
mm,
Because when you think about it, when we're being compassionate towards others, we can see them. We can see their facial expression, we can see their eyes, we can make that eye contact. But self-compassion is slightly trickier because we're looking out through those eyes and not quite
mm,
so able to pick up on those really important non-verbals that humans, connect with and so on. And so something
yeah,
like a practice there, maybe sort of
mm,
sneaking that in, but also, supercharging it by
yeah.
doing it while looking in the mirror.
Yeah, where a lot of the shaming, self-criticism, and I've certainly, as I know, a lot of us have been through and go through.
Mm.
Yeah,
Mm.
still creeps in every now and again, mine.
Yes. Oh,
But
yes, me too.
yeah, yeah. But like you said, supercharged practice because it's often more challenging in the
Challenging.
moment of yeah of the self-critic coming up. Stan, I was I mean, we've been talking about the skills of compassion. I was just thinking, particularly again coming back to the midlife women, but no matter what's going on, but it is often a turbulent or just a big time, in a woman's life with lots going on. I mean, we talked I think, shared earlier just with you know, often they're looking after their elderly parents. They might be still raising their children, or it might be dealing with empty nest. They're maybe second guessing their career, or at the top of their career and a lot of responsibilities. There's just, and then hormonal shifts, perimenopause, menopause. There's a lot going on. And I suppose I just wanted to, what have you noticed, even with anybody, well, I suppose the gifts of compassion. What's the impact of doing this work, committing to the practice of compassion, particularly the practice, widening that circle? What do you notice shifts or changes that would be brilliant for the midlife women in this particular phase, but of their life, but for everybody too? What what are the benefits? What are the
Mm,
impacts? Yeah, that we can look forward
yeah.
to.
Yes, that's right. Um, yeah, there is just so many
Mm,
pressures and demands externally, and it, so they deplete us, and they can even the demands that are very, very important to us, still sort of begin to deplete us in a way, and then you sort of factor in some of the self-criticism that we've been talking about, and all of a sudden, yeah, we're in a really really difficult place of suffering, really, to one degree or another, and things like getting burnt out by it all is sort of
mm,
the where we can end up. So I think what compassion or self-compassion does, it sort of steps in and just gently interrupts perhaps some of the vicious cycle that's happening there. And it kind of it validates it helps us to sort of to validate our experience of things, and that it makes sense that at this time and in this life that there are these many competing demands, and it's hard, it's
mm,
difficult, it's tricky to do all of this, and it then sort of reassures, helps us to feel like time will pass and things will change, and we can get there. We can find the strength and the coping to make our way through it.
mm,
Compassion might even affirm, rather than criticize. Compassion might
mm,
affirm our strengths and our personal qualities and the things that we bring to all of this, and just remind us of who we are and what we do and can do, and what we
mm,
bring to life and to people and to ourselves and so on.
mm,
And then compassion kind of encourages us to just sort of work out what is it that would be really helpful here, and
mm,
perhaps let's sort of have a go at doing that. This
mm.
is where courage comes in with
Yeah.
compassion. Like courage is often the key, because it might be that where where we encourage ourselves to
Mm,
have appropriate rest, for example,
mm, mm,
or pursue certain interests of our own, or
mm.
maybe even set healthy boundaries with others.
Yeah.
And assertiveness can be an important act of self-compassion. And all of those things take a bit of courage, actually, because it
Yeah.
it can create a bit of fear. But what if, what if that
Mm,
something happens or something goes wrong, or what if people start to see me differently, or what if they realize I'm just an imposter here, or so it takes kind of courage to do those various to take those various steps. But the funny thing is that it actually helps us to connect more with our values,
mm,
and to live a more values directed life. And oddly enough, it kind of helps us to sort of take more action in those things that are really important to us, like work or like family
mm,
or like other sorts of things. So it's funny. We with compassion and self-compassion just comes a much just a deeper sense of safeness and security, and
mm,
groundedness and calmness, and even the confidence or the courage that we mention. And from there, we are able to step out into the world and
mm,
do things and explore the world, and but also just recover from little setbacks that might happen, or but
mm,
pursue our goals with a kind of a steadier motivation in a way,
mm,
and maybe some of the old wounds, because many of us have had really really difficult experiences and, maybe difficult attachment experiences or wounds in our early life or,
Mm,
later on. But bringing that self-compassion in, it just softens some of that as well and
yeah.
gives us the wherewithal to sort of connect with others and to open ourselves up to others and to maybe
Mm,
let people in and often have more fulfilling relationships and a kind of not only more fulfilling relationships but also relationships that become really reciprocal on all of these things,
mm,
and we get to be helpful to them and they get to be helpful to us, and it becomes a whole different sort of reciprocal nature to the relationship. So now, as you sort of said, what can we look forward to? And these changes are often just little quiet
mm,
iterative changes. We might start with something small because otherwise fears of compassion might arise. So, we
mhm,
start with something small. We just take a first step in
mm,
in being more compassionate towards ourselves, or maybe we let certain people in and accept their help as well, and so on. But it's the growth is gradual and
mm,
quiet and sort of iterative and as I say, but quite profound in the
mm,
end. And that sometimes people have said to me that they get to this moment where they're sitting there, all sorts of things are whirring around in their mind. Even that self-criticism is coming in, and they're kind of bullying themselves and beating themselves up in their mind, and then kind of out of somewhere
mm,
arrives this other part of themselves that says,
mm,
hang on a sec, it's really hard. What you're going through is actually very hard. It's difficult. And, it's not easy to cope with this sort of thing. And you're doing the best you can.
mm,
Let's just dial down the tone a little bit. Let's just think
mm,
about this slightly differently. What really would be most helpful for you right now? Like what steps could you take in this moment just to alleviate that suffering even just a little bit, and it's kind of like people are like, wow, the compassionate part sort of
mm,
is there when I need it most, sort of
mm.
thing, and that's
Yeah.
that's often a really profound moment.
Yeah, and I've experienced that. And like even today, because I think I started my journey back, oh God, I think it was 2012, but I feel like it was even earlier than that, at a workshop that was incorporating self-compassion, but it was an act one anyway, like, and that was my first foray into this self-compassion thing. And I'm like, ooh. Anyway, but yeah, and fast forward, what are we now? 2025, so 15 years, whatever it's been, 13 years. But like it's just so much more ingrained. I still have, yeah, that of course, because to be human, suffering, things happen. The critic still shows up at times. And but that inner voice, that inner compassionate self, she just shows up a lot quicker. And it's so profound in how it shifts so many things, as you just shared,
Mm.
even the yeah, your relationships, that's been a big shift for me as well, my outward relationships, being able to ask for help, all those things that have just helped walk through this earth in a lot more effective way and still drive towards the things that matter. I mean, I was always a high achiever. I still am, but I'm a balanced achiever now, probably. I'm a more balanced achiever. But you still drive towards the things that matter. Anyway, yeah. Stan, I mean, it's been such a beautiful, well-rounded discussion and getting to know the gifts of compassion. I want to give opportunity for the audience if they want to connect with your work, including the book, like where do they find that? But also, you have a lovely podcast that Compassion in the T-shirt as well. But yeah, tell us where they can find you and connect with your work more.
Yeah, great, thanks. Yeah. um Yeah, well, the gifts of compassion, is it? I think it's just over my
Oh
shoulder as
yeah,
well,
there it
which
is.
is
Yes, with the koala. I've got it.
doing
Yep.
doing the
Yep.
thing with the koala. That's right.
Yeah. Love it.
So actually, I might send you a link to the publisher,
Yeah.
because in some ways that's the best place to get it these days. It seems to have gone up in value at Amazon or things like that. So the publisher is sort of a great place to get it, Australian Academic Press, for the Gifts of Compassion and the companion book. But I have a website, stansteindl.com. And yeah, on there there's lots of there's my books and so on, but other resources, not least the YouTube channel that you mentioned, Compassion in a T-shirt, which you've been a guest on twice. So
Thank you.
we're
It's
doing
fun.
this collab, cool sort of stuff,
Yeah.
being kind of content creators. Yeah, and there's sort of interviews on there, but also little video essays or little meditations and that sort of stuff. But and of course, yeah, just love to connect with people on social media if anyone's
Yeah.
interested, just to keep the conversation going.
Yeah, and really, I like adding things to my feed, particularly my personal feed, that really, yeah, helps support my, well-being. And I think, like, yeah, filling your social media, like with Stan's, and other people that I follow as well. It's just a lovely way to bring compassion into, or bring what you need into your feed as well, to follow creators like yourself, just to boost that message, but boost that connection
Mm.
as well. I think
Yeah,
it's
there's so much of the other stuff, isn't there? And so
exactly.
it's good to have compassion in the feed.
Yeah, if you're going to be sitting there scrolling like I often do, might as well be some stuff that really
Yes.
feeds your soul rather than destroys your soul.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Sounds good.
Well, Stan, thank you so very much for coming in today and sharing your wisdom with all of us. It's been fun. I can continue talking, as you know, but but yeah, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming in and sharing.
Thank you for having me. You're doing really great stuff, and I appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you, Stan. Thanks for listening to Midlife Reclaimed. I hope today's conversation has reminded you that you are not alone and that change is possible even in the busiest seasons of life. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow, rate, or review the podcast and share it with another midlife woman who might need it. For more resources on navigating midlife stress, overwhelm, and burnout, along with reflective writing prompts and community connection, visit shannonswales.com. You can also watch full episodes on YouTube at Midlife Reclaimed. Remember, you have permission to slow down, to rest, and to reclaim what matters most. See you again soon.